Hi, this is David Molapo, welcoming you to ICANN Conversations with David Molapo. This is a special edition today because we want to focus on Human Rights Day. It is true that we have gone through some tumultuous times in this country. And to give us a perspective, a fresh perspective, is our special guest, Mbuyiselo Botha. My brother, welcome to our program.
Well, thank you, Ndate. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us.
Why is Human Rights Day important to you?
Well, it's important because it reminds us not to forget what happened to us, especially as South Africans, that we should not repeat the past, which means, therefore, that we must always be cognizant that we come from a bad past, a toxic past. So human rights, it's an opportunity for us to reflect, to sit back, but to also be proactive and do certain things, Dr. Molapo, that would always remind us not to go back.
But unfortunately, this next generation, as we speak, to them, this is a party, it's a, go away party, it's dry, whatever. What can we do to bring back the main focus on Human Rights Day to particularly the next generation of leaders?
Well, I know that ICANN does this. I think it's the organizations like yours that would, in fact, make sure that we make such days look cool for young people, so that it's important to remind them of where we come from, but let's make sure that it's done in such a way that it's not dogmatic, so that we don't put them in one box, that we think out of the box. I mean, our programs, as we do them, we must always be mindful that there are certain things that appeal to young people. I mean, one of them is Twitter. How do we make sure that our messaging is such that it's relevant, it's appropriate to what is happening today? How do we infuse what's happening with what happened yesterday without necessarily being dogmatic about it, but also without being trapped in the past? Whilst it's important for us to know the past so that we don't repeat the past, but we must be innovative, creative, ensuring that the message of 1960 Sharpeville shooting, it resonates with them, but it can resonate with them when we do or we bring in new ideas, fresh ideas that are hip, without diluting the message, without muddying the water, but ensuring that young people, we take them along, that they're able to see that for the freedoms that they enjoy today, people died. People paid the ultimate price.
It is true that what Nelson Mandela says, that until you find a cause, you're not ready to live. You need to find a cause that you need to die for, and then you're prepared to live and make a meaningful contribution. Yeah. What actually happened March 21st in the 60s? Share with us.
Well, this was an important history, Dr. Molapo, in that it was a deliberate process by political parties led by the Pan-Africanist Congress, with the African National Congress, led by who was called Prof. Sobukwe, the late Prof. Sobukwe, may his soul rest in peace. And other Potlako Leballo from the Pan-Africanist Congress. There were a host of them who, in fact, had on this day had felt that, look, each and every household must go and deliver their dom passes, because the passes were a sign of a deep oppression. They were a sign of an enslavement. So there was a call that went out to say, on this day, on the 21st of March, all South Africans, you will take your passport book, you will take your dom pass to any police station and ban it and avail yourself to be arrested. The purpose being that you're going then to make the system unworkable. Arrest all adult male black South Africans all over the country. And in doing so, you are making sure that the system is in fact rendered inoperative. And it happened in Langa, it happened, Sharkville, it happened all over South Africa. But there were these two most prominent, the Langa shooting, the Sharkville shooting, which was prominent.
Why were they prominent, the Langa shooting and the Sharpeville shooting?
Because here, one of the major reasons was that in Sharkville and in Langa, you had the call was responded to in larger numbers. You have in larger numbers where, in those two particular townships, the police stations were overwhelmed. They could not, seeing a sea of black men and women who have said, we are here to ban these demonic books, but also that we want you to arrest us. These two townships had in fact came face to face with the brutality of apartheid, but then they were unshakable in their belief. That's why then the Saracens, the shooting happened, probably because also the apartheid machinery was intended to send a clear, unambiguous message that so far and not further, we will not allow you to engage in this protest. And as they say, this is the beginning or the genesis of how the Pan-Africanist Congress, all of them were banned, and how the liberation movements, banned into exile, and how some argue that the struggle then began in earnest.
Before we go on a break, when we come back, I want you to share about your involvement and your defining moments there. And the second question I'm also going to ask you is, why is it now that the liberation movements are no longer working together? It's as if after the freedom that we got, we are now separated. Because even this day, March 21st, everybody's claiming it as if it's their own and forgetting the people. Okay. So again, we have got Mbuyiselo Botha, who is giving us a fresh perspective of Human Rights Day, March 21st. We will be back after these messages to unpack even the importance of this day so that we do not forget our history. Remember, if a people forget their history, other people will tell them their history. Unless the hunters tell their stories, the lions will always tell their stories, and vice versa. Unless the lions tell their own stories, the hunters, which are the apartheid regime, will always give us their version. Let's get the right version. We'll be back after these messages. Welcome back to ICANN Conversations with our special guest, obviously a Human Rights Day activist. That's where he actually started his activism. Grootman Pinchiaka Brayarona Mbuyiselo Botha. Thank you so much for giving us this perspective. But personally, how did you get affected during this Sharpeville shooting?
Well, I must just say that I was very young. But the effect was that the father I did not know apparently was shot and died during the 1960 Sharpeville shooting. So it has a direct impact on me being raised by the single strong woman I spoke to earlier on in some segments. So in fact, it made me, it conscientized me at an early age, because then I began to see a mother who struggled, who was also herself arrested, not being a political activist, who was arrested because she was selling these mbamba. She would always be in and out of jail. And it was always, young as I was, my responsibility to go and negotiate for her release. So there was a direct adverse impact in me as a young boy growing out in the dusty township of Sharpeville, Ko 405, Ko Putsastina, and this happened Ko Roystina in the old Sharpeville police station, which now has moved to a place called Pelendaba, and what the new police station. But the history of what it happened was Ko Roystina at the police station, where people were mowed down mercilessly.
And let's be clear that they did not have any arms, the people. They
Oh,
were just
sure.
protesting. It was a peaceful protest. Unfortunately, they were met with fire.
Oh yes. Well,
fire.
the only arms they had with them was their being resolute. I mean, their resoluteness and their commitment to ensure that we will not succumb. That's the only. I mean, these were armless. These were men and women who believed that the system of pass law was the bedrock of all the injustices in our country, where black men and women, their movements would be controlled, curtailed, and stopped at the whim and fancies of the wide regime.
Out of that experience, surely there are some lessons that are learned. How can we, as the older generation, the mature generation, share that message of resolution, their resoluteness, to the next generation, the younger people?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, we should in fact continue to say in our homes, I mean, during the dinner tables, as some people have braais during the 21st of March, as people, some go to, I mean, commemorations, we must continue to ensure that we never forget. I mean, Don Matera talks about, in one of her poems, talks about memory being a weapon. And we must continue to use, I mean, these narratives. What happened in 1960, as I said, to our children, to our grandchildren, it's, for me, the test for us as an older generation is how do we package these things so that these messages, they become attractive, so that it's not all doom and gloom, so that they know that out of that bad experience, the good came out. And the good is 1994 happened, that people went to jail, people died, that we must continue to teach them. But again, Dr. Molapo, it's the packaging. That are they able to relate? We must not reach a point where they become fatigued as young people, that this is unattractive. Halatswara style, man. Please don't, man. They have nothing to do. Make it a point that they realize that the freedoms they enjoy, I mean, all the gadgets, I mean, every and anything that they enjoy, we must always remind them, without trapping them in the past, we must always remind them that you're enjoying all of these things. I mean, free education, access to universities. Remind them that there was a time that as a black person in this country, you would not go to any university without a permission from a minister of apartheid. For an example, F.W. de Klerk, as a former minister of education during apartheid, he was, in fact, he was the person in charge of giving a special permission to black people to attend, especially so-called white universities. So, Dr. Molapo, we must always remind them that these freedoms did not come light, did not come easy. We must always remind them that probably some of the land we're working on are people's graves that are unmarked, that you don't know of. But I want to emphasize that we have a duty as an older generation as to the packaging, so that they become hip-hop without losing the essence of the message.
And I agree with you, because the millennials and the Generation Z or Generation Z, you know, they're all using the fourth industrial revolution, and sometimes they also need truth, honesty, where we can show them the raw footage of people being shot and why it is important for them to know that, so that they understand the sacrifices that were made so that they can enjoy these fringe benefits now.
Absolutely.
Now, you might say education is not important, because the problem with our history, teachers, they don't teach this stuff anymore. So what would you say to that?
Well, it's important that, unfortunately, it's important to say that, I mean, the teacher trade unions, it's important for them to, in fact, and then the Department of Basic Education, Higher Education, it's important for them to inculcate these values of freedom, these values of Ubuntu, these values of where we come from. And I think that there is a way that our history now, I mean, I doubt if our children now, our grandchildren, are being taught about Jan van Riebeeck, who discovered, I mean, you know, who discovered the dark continent. I doubt if that is happening. If that's still happening, it's unfortunate. In fact, we must begin to contrast and compare that education, Van Riebeeck, and teach them about Professor Sobukwe, and teach them about Dr. Rolihlahla Mandela, and teach them, I mean, continue that there were these, I mean, the treason trial. There were all of these. We must we must continue to teach them and bring back and say, this is the liberation history. This is the history that oppressed us, so that they begin to know. So I hope that your Noptosa, your SADTU, your NAGTU, all the trade unions in the education field, I hope that they become conscious that this history must be taught. And it must not only be taught at the previously white, or even, as we speak now, the black township schools, but even the private schools. We must ensure that even there, schools of elitism, schools of the privilege, that they are also taught. When our kids are sent to Houghton, are sent to Rosebank, are sent to all of these schools, we must ensure that as an ANC government, ANC-led government, we must ensure that even in those schools, a right history has been taught, so that my child does not come back home and is conflicted, is confused, and concerned, because all that he's taught in Rosebank, in that private school, is in fact contrary. There's no congruency with what I say here and what he or she's taught at the Houghton School.
Uniformity, wow. We will wrap up these messages with a wonderful man who has been during this revolution of Sharpeville, shooting in the 1960s, Mbuyiselo Botha, after these messages.
At Sharpeville, an industrial township, thousands gather outside a police station in protest against new laws requiring every African to carry a pass at all times.
The bastards ignored the plates, man! No, they weren't scared of all that very well waiting.
Jullie moeten gewoon volmaken. Je schreeuwt moeilijk als je zo. Kom dan, kom dan.
Luister, extra nou van 2 ure, dan duizenden van die de cells are full.
How long is it going to take?
Jullie laatste keer dat hebben jullie kamer gesteld.
Mina, jullie weten informatie! Eenmaal informatie! Hier is de onwettige bijeenkomst! This man is on back to the stadium! This is your final warning! Afkeren! Ceasefire! Find a gun. You better find that gun, sweetheart.
There are many people who feel that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people.
Welcome to ICANN Conversations with David Molapo, with our special guest, Grootman Pinchiaruna, Tate Mbuyiselo Botha. Tate Botha, there's this conspiracy about the new Donbass. The new apartheid system is now this vaccine that people find about Jove, people need now to be injected with this, so that if you do not have an injection, it's like that Donbass, you don't qualify to enter into certain places, go to certain places. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the Molapo and the viewers out there, we must really emphasize that let's listen to the scientists. We're doing a disservice to listen to people who really have no scientific evidence to back up these wild claims. COVID kills. It kills, and it's a serious matter. So let's not play with people's lives. I just want to say that forget about it being a 666, forget about it being a Dompas, it kills. The only thing we can do now is to listen to the scientists and to listen to the doctors, to people who will tell us that, by the way, there is no vaccine without any after effect. There may be long term, there may be short term, but that's not for me as a non-medical person. But what I know is that listening to those that have knowledge, especially our doctors, our scientists, we're going to go a long way in ensuring that we together fight these conspiracies. But let's support this government. Let's support President Ramaphosa. Let's support Dr. Zweli Mkhize. Let's support Minister Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. Let's support them for the Herculean task they're faced with, what they're doing. Let us deal decisively. And these are the platforms that you are giving us to say, we must deal with these conspiracies. They don't help us. In fact, they take us back into the dark ages.
And it is true, it's Human Rights Day, but also, remember, this is voluntary. Nobody will force you.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to take the vaccine,
absolutely,
you've got the right not to take the vaccine, but please keep your comments to yourself.
Absolutely.
As I always say, sometimes you need to use the ministry of shut up, because, you know, that ministry of shut up will help you. But other people who are vulnerable, if they want to take the vaccine, go ahead. It is their human rights responsibility. Now, what would you say now with this conspiracy theory that only the elite, the middle class people are dying out of COVID? What would you say?
I say that it's also part of the misinformation, the miseducation. It's also part of making people to lower their guards. That because I'm poor, because I live in the squatter camp, because I live in a particular township, I am immune. No, none of us are immune from this disease. So it's a lie. It may be that we know of these people that are prominent, that are middle class, because of their names are in the papers, their names are in the television. It doesn't mean that there is no Joe Soap who dies. Their names may not be in the papers, but it doesn't mean that hayo gogwani gog khumalo, hayo gog nomasondo, hayo gog mamang ahlokahalang. No, we must ensure that we educate our people. As they say, knowledge is power. And being ignorant, it kills people. So let's stop this thing that ebulaya batho ba itseng hauli when you are poor o le kobodima hetleng, you know, usna education ha you bulai. Let's continue to wear our mask. Let's continue to synthesize. Let's continue to ensure that we social distancing. Let's continue that we don't do parties. We don't do the pulpit. You know, we practice safe. I mean, we sanitize. We do all of those things. Whether you are poor, whether you are rich, whether you are white, whether you are colored, whether you are Indian. The beauty about the COVID-19, it does not discriminate. It is a disease that's airborne. So each and every Dick, Tom, Harry, or Salamina is vulnerable to it.
Look to the camera and encourage someone today. This is Human Rights Day, but some of them don't feel that they've got the right. Some of them don't feel human. What would you say to them?
Well, I want you to say, as a South African watching us, as listening to us, please know that people died for this freedom. Please know that people paid the ultimate price. And when you don't respect this day, you are in fact spitting at the graves of those who sacrificed. So please, whatever you do, do not spit at the graves of those who came before us, who paid the ultimate price, who died for this freedom. So know that freedom rights, or that this day came in at a huge cost. And when you celebrate, when you mark it, be conscious that the benefit is brought. You are enjoying them because someone else had to pay the ultimate price. So please, wherever you are, have a special, wonderful Human Rights Day, but never forget where we come from, because a nation that forgets where it comes from, or it forgets its history, it's bound, as they say, to repeat the mistakes of the past. So please, don't be that generation. Be a generation that is enlightened. Be a generation that says, this will not happen in my lifetime.
Wow, wise and powerful words from our special guest, Ntate Mbuyiselo Botha. Mebra, as they say, kokasi uncham fwetu.
Yeah, again, again.
Exactly. And again, as we celebrate Human Rights Day, let's also be cognizant of the fact that we want to dedicate this program to the people who are in the forefront, our healthcare workers, their families, all the men and women, the scientists who are trying to ensure that all of us have a better life, all of us are safe. Again, I'll reiterate what Ntate Botha said: wear your mask, keep social distance, sanitize, so that all of us can have a wonderful Human Rights Day, week and month, until sinqoba this coronavirus. First strain, second strain, one wave, second wave. Remember, let's keep hope alive. I can do my part, you can do your part. Together, let's continue to dream and dream big, because we can. Until next week, God bless.